This lecture is about viruses. So we've previously talked about bacteria, which are small single-celled organisms. Viruses are not the same thing at all. In fact, they're not cells. There's some genetic material. It's wrapped up in a protein coat, and that's kind of it. They're what we call obligate intracellular parasites. So if you break this big scientific phrase down, obligate means they have to, intra means inside, cellular, cells, parasites depend on a host for some important part of their life cycle. So they have to get inside a host cell for at least part of their life cycle. And for viruses, if they're not infecting a host cell, they're pretty much not doing anything. They just kind of wait to bump into a host that they can infect. Now, viruses can be generalists, meaning they can infect a wide range of organisms, a wide range of cell types, or they can be specialists, and they can only infect specific host species, even specific cell types. The HIV virus only infects certain cells of our immune system. That protein coat includes structures that are important for the virus to attach to the host cell and then get its genetic material inside the host cell. Once that genetic material is inside a cell, it takes over the host cell machinery, the parts of the host cell that do things like make proteins, make copies of genetic material. And so now the virus is using the host cell to make new virus particles. These kind of automatically self-assemble into new viruses, which can then be released from the cell in various ways and go on to infect another host. Some viruses, not all, will even insert their genetic information into the DNA of the host cell. Basically, that cell is now has that genetic material from the virus in it and will forever, or for the life of the cell. Now, sometimes this can increase the rate of cancer. This is particularly true for the human papillomavirus, HPV. This is one where certain strains of HPV tend to trigger cancerous changes in the cells and leads to cervical, penile, anal, and throat cancers. Get vaccinated for HPV. Other viruses stay there and become, harmless, benign, or even beneficial. The virus then ceases to exist as a separate entity, but their genes get passed down through the host species. We know that 8% of human DNA includes remnants of genes that were originally viral genes. Another 40% is suspected of possibly having a viral origin. Viruses are not organisms. And sometimes this genetic material can be used by the host for other purposes. In humans, the genes that are involved in the production of the placenta during pregnancy originated from a virus. This image shows the DNA of a human female, and in the green fluorescence, those are all places where there's viral genes. I apologize for anybody who's red-green colorblind. Unfortunately, I couldn't find another color combination of this image. But if you look at chromosome 19 here, this is all green except for a little bit of red in the middle. 18 is mostly red. So it's not evenly distributed. One of the things that's important to realize with viruses is that they are not good at quality control. The process of getting their genetic information copied by the host cell is kind of sloppy. It has a high error rate, and so a lot of the copies are going to have mutations. But the virus produces so many individual new viruses that they can have a high error rate. I mean, let's think about this. Humans, we have a handful of children. Say we have 5 kids. If one of them has a genetic mutation, that's a 20% of our offspring, and that's a big deal, and it's ignoring the emotional factor involved, that's going to cut back on our reproductive success. If you're a virus that produces 100,000 offspring, who cares if 20% of them have genetic mutations that mean they don't survive? You still got 80,000 more. It's a numbers game. And some of these mutations will be harmful to the virus, but others mean that they could infect a different host, a different cell type. They could cause different problems. This is one way spillover events happen. Spillover is when a disease that infects one type of animals starts being able to infect humans. We call these diseases zoonotic to indicate they had an animal origin. Now, of course, it can go the other way too, but we mostly think of spillover events as coming from animals into humans. This is the most likely source of the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID. It started in a bat. It probably spilled from the bat into another animal in one of these markets where there's a lot of wildlife crammed into cages close together. And then from that second animal, some more mutations happened and it got into humans. So this can be bad, but sometimes viruses will evolve to not cause disease symptoms. And there are viruses that infect us that just don't cause symptoms or don't cause major symptoms. And some of these integrate their DNA into the host cell and it just kind of, sits around and gets passed on by the people or the animal. Viruses are really cool. Now, when we think of viruses, we can think of flu. We can think of herpes. This is an electron micrograph of herpes virus on the right. We can think of measles, which we don't see much in the United States, thanks to vaccination. HIV. Norovirus. It's one of many digestive disorders caused by viruses. Norovirus is well known for being a real problem on cruise ships where it causes diarrhea. The common cold is caused by viruses. Unlike bacteria, we don't have a lot of antiviral treatments. And antiviral treatments tend to be specific for one virus. They tend not to be generalist. I mean, if you think of an antibiotic, you can take that for a lot of different types of diseases that are caused by bacteria. Not the case with viruses. There are only a handful of viruses that have any antiviral treatment available, and they tend to be some of the more dangerous ones. HIV, hepatitis B and C, and herpes, although herpes is not that dangerous unless it's passed on from a mother to their child during childbirth. So for most viruses, doctors treat the symptoms. They do the supportive care. I've mentioned this phrase before. Supportive care is things like making sure the patient is hydrated, bringing down the fever if the patient has a fever, stopping any diarrhea or vomiting, and then you let the immune system do its job. Now, I mentioned the common cold. We all get colds. Well, I don't know. I haven't had one since the COVID pandemic started. Kind of like that, but before COVID, we all got colds. And the common cold is not actually one disease. It's a collection of symptoms. Stuffy, runny nose, sometimes a headache, sometimes aches, sometimes fever. But it's caused by hundreds of different viruses. There's not one cold virus. There's a bunch of them. And usually they resolve quickly. And in fact, most of the symptoms are your immune response. That snotty, runny nose, that's your immune system fighting off the cold. So antihistamines will help the symptoms because they kind of dial back the immune response. Drinking fluids, resting, staying home if you can. That's pretty much what you can do for the common cold. Prevention, just like any other kind of infectious disease, the best thing to do about viruses is prevention. If you're sick and you can, you should stay home. You should wear a mask in public. Right now, COVID is still a big problem. I'm wearing a mask in public even though I'm vaccinated. And you know, when the flu goes around, I might start wearing a mask in public even if COVID was not a problem. And crowded public places, especially public transportation, good place to wear a mask. I'm not sure I'm going to get on an airplane without wearing a mask ever again. Washing your hands. Soap and water is fine. Wash before eating and after using the bathroom. Get vaccinated. A lot of deadly diseases are pretty much non-existent in the Western world because we've vaccinated against them. And practice safe sex. If you're gonna ride that bicycle, wear that helmet.